العالمين يا رحمن يا رحيم.
The time is just gone 19 minutes past 9 a.m. as we continue with News and Views this morning. Now, we've learned about Minister Blade Nzimande insisting on defining Afrikaans as a foreign language in South Africa. Now, what does this all mean? And if we put this insistence on the part of the minister into perspective, we joined on the line this morning by anti-apartheid activist and president of the Pan-African Psychology Union, Dr. Saths Cooper. Dr. Cooper, good morning to you and welcome to the show.
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
Dr. Cooper, what do you make of the Minister Blade Nzimande insisting on defining Afrikaans as a foreign language?
Well, you know, it's something which he has to properly account for, because we already have a constitutional dispensation where Afrikaans is regarded as one of the official languages. So on that score, he has to make his case. And I think he does have somewhat of a case. And that case is that until the late 60s, Afrikaans was not regarded as a language. It was spoken, yes, and it was evolving from the time of the Trek Boers. And prior to that, the advent of Jan van Riebeeck in the late 17th century. Now, in this country, the universities taught Afrikaans and Nederlands. So it was a combination of the Dutch language as well as the local dialect that emerged from the period of colonization. And it's only in the late 60s that Afrikaans as such becomes a university-taught language. So that's one of the historical facts we have to contend with, that it was something that was imposed. It was something that, in many significant ways, it's like a transplanted people who go to a place called Palestine and then resurrect a dead scriptural language, Hebrew, and make it modern Hebrew. So in a sense, you have here its antecedents, Dutch, but you also have its very clear link with Bahasa Indonesia and Bahasa Malay, because of certain of the words taken. And remember, the Dutch East India Company has colonized to some extent parts of what we now know as modern Indonesia and Malaysia. And certain words and certain phrases that are not in the Dutch language come from places like Indonesia. And you have, therefore, words like pisang, kamel, bloodjang. Those words are not Dutch, they're not Afrikaans, certainly, but they definitely Bahasa Malay and Bahasa Indonesia. So you have that amalgam, but you have that arrogance, that colonial implant arrogance of Afrikaners feeling that they actually own the country, and therefore they create the word Afrikaner to replace the word African. So there's an entire history and etymology to this, and I'm not an expert on that area, but the language definitely has oppressive connotations to it. We know that this country indelibly changed after the uprisings of June 16th, 1976, where Afrikaans was imposed. And in a sense, I can understand where the minister is coming from, because all around us, 27 years after democracy, government has failed to implement a more just, a more equitable policy around language usage and in every area of our lives. So the failings, it's unfortunate that at this point he comes with his attempt to do this, which I'm sure there'll be a howl and cry from the usual suspects, AfriForum, the right-wing Afrikaner group, and others like that are going to jump onto the bandwagon and create all sorts of claims and there'll be counterclaims, and it will lead into local government elections, of course, on the 1st of November this year.
Yes. Now, also, Dr. Cooper, I think one of the key issues here is the lack of policy. And when we're talking about languages, we're talking about a language policy framework. Now, these are open to interpretation, but also at the same time, these are open to constitutional challenges, because we've seen, particularly in education and higher education, where Afrikaans has come under the radar. There was a constitutional court ruling about UNISA changing its language policy to include teaching and learning in Afrikaans by the start of the 2023 academic year. So we have the constitutional court saying one thing, we have the minister saying something, and in a country as diverse as ours, you know, these are going to be huge bones of contention.
Oh yes, look, we should not also ignore that knowledge production in this country does come from a Western place. The scientific and other underpinnings of nearly everything we do come from a dominant Western cultural perspective. And in our universities, the first few universities, of course, Cape Town, because it morphed from the College of Good Hope in the colonial era when the British were still there, to the University of Cape Town, what we now know as UCT. And within a couple of years, literally, the Stellenbosch Gymnasium becomes the University of Stellenbosch. And that begins the imprint of Afrikaans domination in all spheres of our lives. We know that the various institutes created there were oriented towards the upliftment and the dominance of Afrikaners as a group. And that history is very significant. You then have Pretoria University, you then have the further right Potchefstroom University, and then Free State, of course. So you have all these seats of knowledge production which come from Afrikaner domination. And in the democratic dispensation, instead of creating more centers of excellence, particularly with the historic black colleges, we equalize things such that the dominance of English emerges, and Afrikaans intellectual production continues apace. Whereas black knowledge production, if you like, in this country has deteriorated, if anything, even though our numbers in terms of enrollment are massive. But in real terms, the narrative, the knowledge creation, the underpinnings of what is taught, the very language, the very subject choices, all of those are firmly ensconced in the colonial modality. They're firmly ensconced, if you like, even in the racist apartheid modality. So whatever needs to be done, Minister Nzimande is waking up a little too late. He needs to accelerate the creation of curricula that meet this country's needs, not merely to create wage slaves, but also to create intellectual giants in the various kinds of areas that will propel this country on the southern tip of the African continent into intellectual excellence. Right now, we're in the doldrums in every index that's possible. We are suffering, and that's because over 27 years now, I think the government lost its plot, and as you correctly point out, policy needs to be redefined and created so that you really get the opportunity for young people, our young minds, our kids, our future, to have a better opportunity to excel in this narrowly prescriptive world where jobs are not being created. You have to create that job. And we know that from our unemployment and other statistics.
Exactly. And also, I think just finally, Dr. Cooper, 27 years into the democracy of the country, one would have expected at the very least young people who would have been through the entire education system from beginning right till the end, where we would have started seeing some of the fruits, some of the benefits of these kids growing up and being schooled, being educated in a democratic environment and in a democratic South Africa, but we're not seeing this.
No, we're not. In fact, we have an entrenchment of the colonial ethic. We have the Western dominance in all spheres of our lives. Indeed, you and I are speaking in English, in a station which is reaching out to a multitude of people out there, not only in this country, but other parts of the world, who speak in different tongues. And yes, we do have the opportunity as far as language enablement is concerned to grow and consolidate certain languages. But in Afrikaans in particular, there's always been the clamor that our language is dying, etc., etc., etc. And so I think that Mr. Blade Nzimande should think carefully how he interprets not only the language policy, but also interprets the opportunity to change the higher education landscape, which is deteriorating at a terrible pace, and we are not creating those kinds of opportunities for our children that we ought to create.
Well, Dr. Cooper, as always, we do appreciate you taking time out, talking to us here on Salam Media, and we wish you all the best. Please take care.
Thank you. You too.
Dr. Saths Cooper with us this morning. We're going to go for a break. We come back, we'll be joined by Ashraf Patel.